What happens when a guest appearance on daytime television turns into an explosive showdown that nobody saw coming? It only took 36 seconds of Denise Welch's opening remarks to ignite a firestorm that would leave the entire Loose Women panel speechless and a guest fighting back tears of frustration. This is the story of how a simple interview spiraled into one of the most dramatic exits in talk show history. The studio lights were bright that afternoon as the Loose Women panel settled into their usual spots. Denise Welch sat in her signature position, flanked by Ruth Langsford and Janet Street Porter, with Colleen Nolan rounding out the panel. The energy in the room felt standard, routine even, as they prepared to welcome their guest. The makeup team had just finished their final touches. The audience members were settling into their seats, chatting quietly amongst themselves. The cameras were positioned perfectly. Everything was in place for what should have been just another day of lighthearted television conversation. Nobody in that studio, not the crew, not the producers, not the audience members, and certainly not the guest, could have predicted what was about to unfold. The guest walked onto the set to warm applause, taking a seat across from the panel with a genuine smile that lit up their entire face. They looked excited, perhaps a bit nervous, but mostly grateful to be there. The interview started pleasantly enough, with the usual exchange of greetings and pleasantries. Ruth Langsford kicked things off with a softball question about recent projects, her tone warm and inviting, as always. The guest answered with enthusiasm and warmth, leaning forward slightly as they spoke, making eye contact with each panelist in turn. The audience seemed engaged, leaning in to hear the responses, occasionally nodding along. Everything appeared to be going smoothly. The conversation flowed naturally. There were a few laughs. The guests seemed to be relaxing into the rhythm of the show. But then Denise Welch leaned forward, and something in her expression shifted. "You know what I find interesting?" Denise began, her tone changing from casual to pointed in an instant, "is how some people come on shows like this and act like they are doing us a favor. Like their time is so much more valuable than everyone else's. Like they are slumming it by appearing on daytime television." The guest's smile faltered immediately, confusion flickering across their face. Their body language changed in an instant, shoulders tensing. "I am sorry, what do you mean by that? I do not understand where that is coming from." Ruth Langsford quickly interjected, her eyes darting between Denise and the guest, trying to steer things back on track. "Denise, I think we should focus on the actual interview here. Our guest has had such an incredible journey, and I would love to hear more about that. They have accomplished so much, and that is what we should be discussing." But Denise wasn't finished. She waved her hand dismissively at Ruth, her eyes fixed firmly on the guest with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. No, Ruth, I think this is important to address. You see, I have been in this industry for decades. I have seen people come and go. I have watched careers rise and fall. And there is a certain attitude that some people have, this entitlement, this superiority complex, that really grinds my gears. It bothers me deeply." The guest straightened up in their chair, clearly taken aback, their hands gripping the armrests. "I am not sure what you are referring to. I really am not. I came here today with nothing but respect for this show and everyone on this panel. I was honored to be invited. I told my agent how excited I was about this appearance." Janet Street Porter shifted uncomfortably in her seat, exchanging a worried glance with Colleen Nolan. Her distinctive features contorted into a frown. The atmosphere in the studio had completely changed in a matter of seconds. What had been a light, friendly conversation moments ago now felt charged with tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. The audience members stopped their casual movements. The crew members glanced at each other nervously. Something was happening, and nobody seemed quite sure how to stop it. Denise continued, her voice rising slightly, each word delivered with increasing sharpness. "Oh, please, do not give me that innocent act. I have seen it too many times before. Do not sit there and pretend you do not know what I am talking about. I have done my research. I know exactly what you said in that interview last month about talk shows and how they are beneath serious artists. I read every single word. Remember that? Remember saying that?" The guest's face flushed, a deep red creeping up their neck. That quote was taken completely out of context. Completely and utterly out of context. I was talking about a very specific type of programming, not shows like this. I was referring to tabloid shock value content, not genuine conversation shows. If you had read the full interview instead of just a headline, if you had bothered to look at the complete context, you would understand that. Anyone who read the full piece would understand. Taken out of context, Denise repeated mockingly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. That is always the excuse, is it not? Every single time someone gets called out for something they said, suddenly it was taken out of context. Every time a celebrity has to face their own words, they claim misrepresentation. It is the oldest trick in the book. Ruth tried again to intervene, her voice becoming firmer, more authoritative. Denise, I really think we need to move on from this. This is not productive. Our guest is here to talk about their new work, and I think that is what our audience wants to hear about. That is what they tuned in for. This hostility is not what anyone signed up for today. The audience deserves honesty, Denise snapped back at Ruth, her frustration now clearly visible, her face flushed with emotion. They deserve to know who they are really watching, not some carefully crafted public image, not some media-trained robot spouting rehearsed answers. They want authenticity. They want truth. And I am giving them that. Colleen Nolan finally spoke up, her voice calm but firm, trying to be the voice of reason. This is getting out of hand, Denise. We invited a guest here for a friendly conversation, not an interrogation, not an ambush. Can we please just take a breath and reset? Can we start over and approach this differently? The guests looked directly at Denise, their voice steady despite the obvious emotion bubbling just beneath the surface. I came here today because I thought this would be a respectful conversation. I prepared for this appearance. I look forward to it. I have always admired this show and the women on this panel. I watch this show regularly. But right now, sitting here in this moment, I feel like I am being attacked for something I did not even do. This is not fair. This is not right. Life is not fair, Denise shot back immediately, without missing a beat. And the sooner you learn that, the better off you will be in this business. You want to be in the spotlight? You want the fame and the attention and the accolades? Well, this comes with it. This is part of the package. People asking you tough questions. People holding you accountable. People challenging your statements. You do not get to have it both ways. Janet Street Porter leaned forward, her distinctive voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Accountable for what exactly, Denise? What has our guest actually done wrong here? Because from where I'm sitting, looking at this situation objectively, you are making accusations without any real substance behind them. You are attacking someone based on a misinterpreted quote. That is not fair journalism. That is not holding anyone accountable. Denise turned to Janet, clearly irritated by the pushback from her colleague. Oh, so now you are all ganging up on me? Is that what is happening here? Typical, absolutely typical. I am the only one here willing to ask the real questions, to dig beneath the surface, and you all want to play nice and safe. You all want to protect this person for reasons I cannot understand. The guest took a deep breath, hands clasped tightly together, knuckles turning white from the pressure. I appreciate Janet and Ruth and Colleen trying to keep this civil. I appreciate them trying to maintain some professionalism here, but I need to say something directly to you, Denise, face to face. I do not know what I did to upset you. I genuinely do not know. I do not know why you seem to have this vendetta against me. But I came here in good faith, and I have been nothing but polite and respectful since the moment I walked onto this set. I greeted everyone warmly. I thanked the crew. I smiled at the audience. What more do you want from me? Good faith? Denise let out a harsh laugh, throwing her head back. You have been putting on a performance since you sat down, since the moment you walked through that door. I can see right through it. I have been doing this long enough to recognize insincerity when I see it. Ruth's voice became more authoritative, her patience clearly wearing thin. Denise, this needs to stop, right now. This instant. This is completely unprofessional. This is not what we do here. This is not who we are as a show. Unprofessional? Denise's voice rose even higher, her face reddening. I will tell you what is unprofessional. Having guests on this show who look down their noses at us while pretending to be humble and grateful. Having people sit in that chair and act like they are blessing us with their presence. That is what is unprofessional. That is what bothers me. The guests stood up abruptly, their chair scraping against the floor, clearly reaching a breaking point. I have tried to be patient here. I have tried my absolute best to understand where you are coming from. I have tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. But I will not sit here and be disrespected like this anymore. I will not tolerate this kind of treatment. I have done nothing to deserve this. Nothing at all. Denise stood up as well, pointing a finger directly at the guest. There it is. There is that attitude I was talking about. The exact attitude I was describing. The moment someone challenges you, the moment someone does not bow down and worship you, the moment someone treats you like a regular person instead of a celebrity, you run away. You cannot handle it. I am not running away, the guest replied, their voice shaking slightly but still strong. I am choosing not to engage with someone who has clearly decided to be hostile, regardless of what I say or do. You made up your mind about me before I even sat down. There is a difference between running away and protecting yourself from abuse. And that is what this is. This is abuse. Colleen stood up, moving between them, her hands raised in a calming gesture. Everyone just needs to calm down. Please. This has gotten completely out of control. We are on live television, for goodness sake. There are people watching. There are children watching. We need to remember where we are, Janet added, standing as well. This is not what this show is supposed to be about. We are supposed to lift each other up, not tear each other down. We are supposed to support women, not attack them. That is the whole point of Loose Women. That is why people watch us. Denise turned on Janet, her frustration now directed at her colleague. Oh, spare me the sanctimonious lecture, Janet. Spare me the moral superiority. You have had your fair share of controversial moments on this panel. You have said things that upset people. Do not pretend you are above all this. Do not act like you have never been harsh with a guest. The guests moved away from the table, clearly preparing to leave, gathering their composure. I want to thank Ruth, Janet, and Colleen for trying to make this work. I genuinely appreciate your efforts. You tried to maintain professionalism. You tried to keep this civil. But I cannot stay here any longer. This is not healthy for anyone, least of all me. I need to leave before this gets even worse. Ruth stood up, reaching out with both hands. Please, do not leave like this. I am begging you. We can fix this. We can have a proper conversation. We can start fresh. Give us another chance. But the guests shook their head firmly. I appreciate that, Ruth. I really do. You have been nothing but kind, but some things cannot be fixed in the moment. Some damage is already done. Denise has made it very clear how she feels about me, and I see no point in prolonging this agony. I see no point in subjecting myself to more of this treatment. Denise crossed her arms. Defensively, her face set in a hard expression. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This proves my point perfectly. Cannot handle a little bit of pressure. Cannot handle someone questioning them. Cannot handle being treated like everyone else. This is the problem with people today, especially people in entertainment. They want all the glory, but none of the scrutiny. They want the spotlight, but not the heat. The guests turned back one more time, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. You call this scrutiny? This is not scrutiny, Denise. This is not journalism. This is not holding someone accountable or asking tough questions. This is bullying, pure and simple bullying. This is you using your position on this panel to belittle someone for reasons I still do not understand. And I feel sorry for you. I genuinely feel sorry for you. Because if this is how you treat people who come here as guests, who volunteer their time to be on your show, who come here with open hearts, then something is very wrong. Something is deeply broken here. Janet nodded vigorously, her voice emphatic. Our guest is absolutely right. They are 100% right. This has crossed a line that should never have been crossed. We have rules here. We have standards. And those standards were violated today. Colleen put a hand on the guest's shoulder gently. I am so sorry this happened to you. I am truly, deeply sorry. This is not how we operate. This is not who we are as a show. This is not the Loose Women that I know and love. I hope you know that. Ruth looked directly at Denise, her expression a mixture of anger and disappointment. You owe our guest an apology, a sincere apology. What you have done here today is unacceptable. It is beneath you. It is beneath this show. It is beneath all of us. Denise remained defiant, her jaw set. I will not apologize for speaking my mind. I will not apologize for asking tough questions. I will not apologize for being honest. That is what I am here to do. That is my role on this panel, to say what others will not say. Asking tough questions is one thing, Ruth countered, her voice rising with passion. Being honest is one thing. What you did was something else entirely. You came at our guest with hostility from the very beginning, from your first comment. You made assumptions and accusations without any basis in fact, and now you have driven them off our show. You have humiliated them on national television. The guests picked up their belongings with shaking hands, their phone, their water bottle, their notes. I wish I could say this was a good experience. I wish I could say I enjoyed being here. I wish I could say I would recommend other guests to come on this show. But I would be lying. And unlike what Denise seems to think, I do not lie. I do not put on acts. I am exactly who I appear to be. I am authentic. And right now, I am someone who has been deeply hurt by this entire situation. Wounded by what happened here today. Janet stood as well, walking over to the guest with purpose. You have conducted yourself with grace and dignity throughout this entire ordeal. You should be proud of how you handled this. You kept your composure when many others would have lost it. You remained articulate and clear. You stood up for yourself without being cruel in return. Thank you, Janet, the guest replied softly, their voice thick with emotion. That means a lot coming from you. More than you know. Colleen joined them, putting an arm around the guest. If you ever want to come back, under different circumstances, with different panelists perhaps, we would love to have you. Please know that. Please do not let this one terrible experience define your view of everyone here. The guest managed a small smile through the pain. I appreciate that, Colleen. You have been wonderful. But I think I need some time before I even think about that possibility. I need to process what just happened. I need to heal from this. Denise remained seated, watching the scene unfold with an expression that was difficult to read. Was it satisfaction at proving her point? Was it regret starting to creep in? Was it stubborn pride keeping her from backing down? Perhaps it was a mixture of all three, a complicated emotional cocktail that she herself might not have been able to name. Ruth addressed the cameras directly, her professionalism kicking in despite the chaos. I think we need to take a break. When we come back, we will try to salvage what is left of today's show. We will address what happened here. But the guest was already walking toward the exit, each step deliberate and measured, their head held high despite the circumstances. The studio fell into an awkward silence, punctuated only by the sound of footsteps echoing across the floor and the quiet murmurs of the shocked audience members who could not quite believe what they had just witnessed. Janet called out one more time, her voice carrying across the studio. You are welcome here anytime. Please remember that. Please do not forget that most of us wanted you here. The guest paused at the edge of the set, right before disappearing behind the curtain, turning back to look at the panel one final time. Their voice was steady now, clear and strong. I came here today hoping to share my story, hoping to connect with your audience, hoping to have a meaningful conversation about my work and my journey. Instead, I leave feeling attacked and diminished and questioned about my character. I hope that for future guests, this show can return to being the warm, welcoming space it is supposed to be. I hope no one else has to go through what I just went through. And with those final words hanging in the air like smoke, the guest walked off the set completely, disappearing from view, leaving behind a panel in complete disarray and an audience sitting in stunned, uncomfortable silence. Ruth turned to Denise immediately, her expression a mixture of anger and profound disappointment. The kind of disappointment that runs deeper than simple frustration. I hope you realize what you have just done. I hope you understand the damage you have caused, not just to our guest, not just to this show, but to your own reputation. This will follow you. Denise finally spoke, her voice slightly less confident than before, a crack appearing in her armor. I was just trying to have a real conversation. I was trying to get past the surface-level nonsense that we usually do. I was trying to bring some authenticity to this panel. By attacking someone, Janet interjected sharply, her voice cutting like glass. By making them feel unwelcome and unsafe? By humiliating them in front of millions of viewers? That is your idea of a real conversation? That is your version of authenticity? Colleen sat back down heavily, the weight of what happened pressing down on her shoulders. This is going to have repercussions, Denise. Serious repercussions. You know that, right? This is not something we can just sweep under the rug and pretend never happened. People saw this. People recorded this. This is out there now. Denise looked around at her fellow panelists, perhaps finally recognizing the severity of what had transpired. Her eyes moved from face to face, seeing only disappointment and anger reflected back at her. I may have come on a bit strong. Perhaps I could have approached it differently. A bit strong? Ruth repeated incredulously, her voice rising with disbelief. You completely ambushed our guests from the very beginning. From your very first comment, you had your mind made up about them before they even opened their mouth. You did not give them a fair chance. You did not give them any chance at all. The studio crew bustled around them, preparing for the break to end, adjusting cameras and checking sound levels. But the tension among the panel remained thick and palpable, like fog you could cut with a knife. Janet shook her head slowly, her expression grave. I have been on television for a long time, Denise. Decades. I have seen a lot of controversial moments. I have been part of some controversial moments myself. But what just happened here, that was different. That was not controversy. That was not even conflict. That was personal. That was cruel. That was vindictive. Denise shifted in her seat, her earlier bravado beginning to crack and crumble like old paint. I did not mean for it to go that far. I did not intend for them to leave. But it did go that far, Colleen said quietly, her voice sad. And they did leave. And now we all have to deal with the fallout. We all have to answer for what happened here today. Not just you, all of us. Because we are a team, whether you remember that or not. Ruth looked at the cameras, then back at her colleagues, gathering her thoughts. When we come back from this break, we need to address what happened head on. We cannot just pretend everything is fine and move on to the next segment. We cannot act like nothing happened. Our audience deserves honesty. They deserve transparency. They deserve to know how we feel about this. Honesty, Denise murmured, the irony not lost on anyone at the table. The moments ticked by slowly as the panel sat in uncomfortable silence. The energy that had been so explosive just minutes ago now felt deflated, heavy with the weight of what had occurred. Each woman lost in her own thoughts about what had just happened. Janet broke the silence, her voice firm and clear. That guest showed more class in the way they left than you showed in the way you treated them, Denise. I hope you can see that. I hope you can recognize that truth. They could have screamed. They could have thrown things. They could have cursed you out, but they did not. They maintained their dignity. Denise did not respond, staring down at her hands folded on the table, studying her rings, her nail polish, anything to avoid eye contact. Ruth continued, her voice taking on a tone of sadness. We have built this show on the idea of women supporting women, of having open, honest, but respectful conversations, of creating a space where people can disagree without being disagreeable. What happened today goes against everything we stand for, everything we have worked to build over the years. Colleen nodded in agreement, her eyes glistening slightly. Our guest came here vulnerable, willing to share their experiences, willing to open up to us and our audience. And instead of creating a safe space for that, we, or rather one of us, made them feel attacked, made them feel small, made them regret coming here at all. The stage manager signaled that they would be back on air in moments, holding up fingers for the countdown. Ruth straightened her papers, trying to compose herself, wiping a stray hair from her face. Janet took a sip of water, her hand trembling slightly. Colleen smoothed her hair and checked her reflection in a compact mirror. And Denise sat very still, the reality of the situation clearly beginning to sink in, her face pale. As the cameras prepared to roll again, the four women on the panel knew that something fundamental had shifted in their dynamic. The trust that existed between them had been damaged, perhaps irreparably. The reputation of the show had been tarnished. And somewhere beyond the studio walls, a guest was likely still processing the emotional trauma of what they had just experienced, probably crying in a dressing room or a car. Ruth took a deep breath as the countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Loose Women, she said, her voice steady but somber, the weight of responsibility clear in her tone. Before we continue with today's show, we need to address what just happened during our last segment. Our guest has left the building, and I think we owe our audience an explanation. We owe them honesty. Janet jumped in immediately, wanting to make her position clear. What you just witnessed was not acceptable. It was not okay. As someone who has been part of this show for years, someone who cares deeply about what we do here, I want to apologize to our guest, wherever they are right now, and to everyone watching at home. That should not have happened, Colleen added, her voice, emotion evident in every word. This is not who we are. This is not what Loose Women represents. We are supposed to be a place where people feel comfortable, where they feel heard, where they feel respected, and I am deeply sorry that our guest had to go through that experience. Truly sorry. All eyes turned to Denise. The studio fell silent once more, waiting, the audience holding their collective breath. Denise looked at the camera, then at her colleagues, her mouth opening and closing once before she finally spoke. I clearly handled that wrong. Very wrong. I let my emotions get the better of me. I made assumptions that I should not have made. I was unfair. Ruth pressed further, not letting her off easy. "Do you understand why our guest left?" "Yes," Denise replied, her voice barely above a whisper, her usual confidence completely gone. "I do. I understand completely." "And do you take responsibility for creating that situation?" Janet asked pointedly, leaning forward. Denise nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. "I do. I take full responsibility." The audience remained hushed, absorbing the unprecedented nature of what they were witnessing unfold before them. This was not the usual banter and disagreement that characterized Loose Women, the playful arguments and differing opinions. This was something more serious, more raw, more real. Colleen spoke directly to the viewers, looking into the camera with sincerity. "If our guest is watching this right now, wherever you are, I want you to know that we hear you, we see you, we understand why you left, and we are sorry for what you went through. You deserve better," Ruth concluded, her voice catching slightly. "We will do better. We have to do better. Because every person who sits in that guest chair deserves respect, kindness, and a fair hearing. Today, we failed to provide that, and that failure rests with us, with this panel, and we own that." The weight of those words hung in the air as the panel sat together, united in their acknowledgement of what had gone wrong, but fractured by the events that had led to this moment. The damage had been done, the guest had walked away, and the show that prided itself on open conversation had learned a painful lesson about the line between honesty and hostility, between being direct and being cruel. The remaining minutes of the broadcast felt strained and awkward, like watching people walk through thick mud. Attempts to move on to other topics fell flat. Discussions about lighter subjects felt forced and inappropriate. The energy simply was not there. Nobody's heart was in it. The elephant in the room, or rather the absence in the guest chair, loomed large over everything, casting a shadow that could not be ignored. When the show finally ended and the cameras stopped rolling, when the red lights went dark, the panel dispersed quickly. There were no warm goodbyes, no casual chatter, no plans to grab lunch together. Just four women processing what had happened in their own ways, each carrying their own burden of guilt and responsibility. In that moment, somewhere beyond the studio, the guest who had walked away was likely still feeling the sting of those harsh words, the confusion of being ambushed on live television, the hurt of being judged so unfairly by someone they had admired. They had arrived at the studio that day with hope and excitement, with prepared stories to share and points to make. They left with pain and disappointment, with their confidence shaken and their trust betrayed. And on that set, in that chair where the guest had sat for those brief, terrible minutes, there remained an invisible mark, a reminder of when a conversation went horribly wrong, when hospitality turned to hostility, when professionalism crumbled into pettiness, and when one person's decision to attack rather than engage changed everything in just 36 seconds of explosive television that would be replayed and discussed for days to come.